Imagine a world before science, before we understood the stars or the rain. For early humans, the night wasn't just dark, it was a physical wall of terror. You are a fragile creature, surrounded by predators with perfect night vision. But the animals were not the most frightening part of this prehistoric world. It was the sky. It was the sudden, violent shifts in the environment. Imagine seeing a thunderstorm without knowing what electricity is. To a Paleolithic mind, a jagged bolt of lightning splitting a tree wasn't weather. It was an intentional act of violence. It was a display of incomprehensible power. When the earth shook and swallowed entire campsites, it felt deeply personal. When a drought starved the tribe, it felt like a punishment. The human brain is a pattern recognition machine, desperate for answers. We cannot tolerate chaos. We have to know why the river flooded. And because we had no physics, no biology, and no meteorology, we used the only frame of reference we had, ourselves. If I hit a tree because I am angry, the sky must also be angry. This psychological leap birthed the very first human belief system. Animism, the belief that the entire world was conscious, just like us. The whispering wind wasn't air pressure, it was a voice. The rushing river wasn't gravity, it was a living, breathing spirit moving across the land. Every rock, every ancient tree, and every mountain peak contained a soul. The world was alive, and more importantly, it was constantly watching them. This fundamentally changed how early humans interacted with their environment. You couldn't just cut down a forest or slaughter a herd of deer without consequence. If you disrespected the spirit of the bear you hunted, its brethren might take revenge. So, hunters began to apologize to their prey. They performed quiet rites over fallen animals, thanking the spirit for its flesh. They treated the wilderness with a mixture of profound gratitude and absolute dread. Because if the spirits provided the food, they could also take it away. And as winter approached and the sun grew weaker in the sky, humanity realized they needed a way to speak back to the spirits. Fear evolved into a radical new idea, the bargain. If the sky is angry, perhaps we can calm it down. If the earth is withholding the spring, perhaps we can trade for it. This was the invention of the ritual, a physical bridge to the invisible world. They gathered the most valuable things they had, rare fruits, fresh meat, or sacred grains, and they laid them upon flat stones, creating the world's first altars. The offering was a desperate negotiation. We give you this, so you do not destroy us. But simple gifts were not enough. The spirits required a spectacle. Tribes began to move together in synchronized rhythms around the fire. They invented sacred dances, stomping the earth to wake the dormant seeds. They wore the skulls and hides of predators, believing they could absorb their power. Rituals gave our ancestors something absolutely vital for survival, the illusion of control. If the dance was performed perfectly, they believed the sun would rise. If the song was sung without error, the herd would return. But communicating with the divine was dangerous and required a specialist. Enter the shaman, the very first profession in human history. The shaman was the designated intermediary between the mud of the earth and the magic of the unseen. They were healers, storytellers, and the keepers of the tribe's deepest secrets. Using repetitive drumming, fasting, and potent herbs, they would enter extreme trance states to cross the boundary into the spirit realm. It was their job to ask the forest why the hunt had failed. And to document these spiritual journeys, they created humanity's first cathedrals, caves. Deep underground, in total darkness, illuminated only by flickering torches, as they painted magnificent, flowing murals of mammoths, horses, and stags. These cave paintings, like the ones in Lascaux, were not just ancient art galleries. They were magical manifestations, a prayer painted in crushed ochre and charcoal. By painting the animal on the wall, they believed they were capturing its soul in reality. The shaman provided a psychological shield against the terrors of the wild. They told the tribe that they were not alone, that someone was listening. And as humanity grew, these simple cave prayers would reach for the sky. As the Ice Age ended, humans stopped wandering and planted the first seeds. Agriculture changed everything. Survival now depended entirely on the calendar. If you planted too early, the frost killed the crop. Too late, and winter starved you. The sky was no longer just a source of storms, it was a divine clock. To honor this clock, humans began moving impossibly massive rocks. Sites like Göbekli Tepe were built 12,000 years ago, long before the invention of the wheel or even pottery. Thousands of hunter-gatherers united to carve and raise towering stone pillars. Later came Stonehenge, a megalithic masterpiece of prehistoric engineering. These monuments required generations of back-breaking, grueling labor. They were designed as giant astronomical instruments to track the solstices, when the midwinter sun perfectly aligned through the stone arches. It was absolute proof that their rituals were working. The stone circles were a permanent, unbreakable contract with the heaven, a way of screaming into the void, "We are here, and we remember the rules." As tiny farming villages swelled into the world's first massive cities, the formless spirits of the forest were no longer enough to rule millions of people. The spirits evolved. They took on human names, human faces, and human flaws. This was the birth of the great pantheons in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Greece. The storm wasn't just magic anymore. It was Zeus hurling a thunderbolt in a rage. The desert sun was Ra sailing his golden chariot across the sky. By making the gods human-like, the chaotic universe became a family drama, and religion became the ultimate social glue for early civilization. It allowed 10,000 strangers to cooperate without killing each other. Because even if they didn't know each other, they feared the exact same divine king. The shared rituals forged empires, built the pyramids, and wrote the first laws. But at its core, under the marble temples and golden statues, religion provided the exact same comfort it did in the Paleolithic caves. A promise that our suffering is not random and that death is not the end of the story. We are still just looking up at the stars. Subscribe for more ancient stories.